Protesters from all over the country are gathering in the East Midlands to fight plans to carry out fracking. They've set up a camp in Nottinghamshire, convinced that the first application to start drilling is only weeks away. Fracking is a controversial new technique to drill deep underground. It uses high-pressure water and chemicals to release gas, and large parts of the East Midlands are said to be rich in potential shale gas, with licences covering many parts of Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire already granted. Well, in a moment, we'll be speaking to the Chief Operating Officer of a company looking to carry out fracking here. But first, Helen McCulloch's been to the protesters' camp near Retford to meet the people keen to stop him.
In a wood in North Nottinghamshire, a protest camp is growing.
I came down from Scotland and I heard that they were setting up here, and I thought, with Nottingham and the Robin Hood legends and so on, and the nature reserve next door, this would be a good place to try and turn the tide.
At the moment, they're objecting to drilling to extract methane gas from the coal bed below the ground. But with this area potentially rich in shale gas, it could soon become the next battleground in the fight against fracking.
We've been told that the first application for fracking in the East Midlands could come as soon as the next 2 weeks. And protesters here are making their plans.
If these companies make mistakes, we know that. We know they lie. And they're just using some horrible chemicals, and the operation is just going to mess with everything sooner or later. For example, the aquifer under our feet now stretches 55 miles to Bucks, and it's one of the largest aquifers in the country. If they make a mistake, contaminate that, that's millions of people without drinking water.
Hello there. Hello. Like some leaflets?
Kat Bertger from the Green Party is a regular visitor to the camp. She shares the concerns voiced by protesters here.
And we need to have strict regulations in place.
Well, this is the joke, isn't it? It's an absolute joke. Cameron says, oh, you know, we're going to have strict and robust. Wherever that word robust turns up, you know that there's lies and subterfuge going on. There is no regulation. And really, is regulation possible? You tell me how you're going to regulate when you drill a mile down, turn left and drill for another mile. How are you going to regulate that?
The Green Party is strongly opposed to fracking and wants to see the money spent instead on developing renewable energy.
Solar energy worldwide produces more jobs than the fossil fuel industry combined. Now, this is enormous, and these are local jobs. Here in the East Midlands, we could have more wind farms like this, on and offshore. We could invest in tidal power. We're an island. We've got the sea surrounding us. So why are we not investing in a technology that already exists and which would produce a lot of local jobs?
To produce just 10% of the gas that we need in this country, we're talking about 300 wells every year for the next 10 years. So that's 3,000 wells drilled over the next 10 years.
But fracking companies have the backing of the Prime Minister and are casting their eyes over the East Midlands. Protesters too are heading to the region, and the battle lines are being drawn.
Well, if fracking does go ahead, it looks like there'll be lots of protests along the way. Let's speak to John Blaymyers now, who's the Chief Operation Officer of iGas, which has an exploration and development licence for the north of our region. And John, where exactly are you with these plans for our region?
Yes, good afternoon. We have licences, as you say, in the region, and we actually operate already some 20 oil fields in the area. And these oil fields have been there for decades, producing wells being drilled successfully, without incident, safely and environmentally responsibly. So this is not something new we're talking about. There's a long history in the area of
oil, yes,
of
exploration.
Oil,
but what about fracking? When will that start, John?
Well, again, in terms of shale fracking, the first thing that has to happen is we have to explore and establish the presence of shale and ascertain whether or not it's economically attractive. And that will entail, at some point, having to frack the well in order to get the gas to flow. And our expectation is that's probably going to occur sometime in the first instance in 2015.
So next year. So what do you say to those protesters who say that fracking isn't safe, that chemicals could actually spill out into the water supply?
Well, I think we need to understand a few things here. First of all, we are highly regulated. In fact, we're probably one of the most highly regulated industries, not just here, but actually the regulatory regime is recognised globally as being a gold standard. But that's
Can
point
you really
one.
regulate a pipe that's miles underground? I mean, this is what the protesters are saying, it can't be possible.
It can, and it is. I mean, the HSE, the Health and Safety Executive, the Department of Energy and Climate Change, the Environment Agency, the local planning officers, and above all else, the local communities in which we operate watch us and monitor us on a day-by-day basis.
OK, John, well, let me bring in Jessica Lee here. Parts of your area in Derbyshire have the potential to produce the shale gas that John's talking about. Would you like to see it in your area, Ilkeston, for example?
Well, there's certainly no specific plans actually at all in Ilkeston at the moment. I think what people need is reassurance. They need the information. People need that knowledge so they understand the process. I think that's really important. I think that's when MPs and local councils in particular, when they are involved, will really have to take the lead on that.
And John, David Cameron has said that communities and individuals will get a share of the profits from any fracking in those communities. Is that just bribery or does that make common sense?
No, this is. I think it's more than a share. They will get on an established site that is producing. They'll get 1% of the revenues, which that can amount to several £million per site over the life of that site.
What do you
Point
think?
one. And point two, they also the government has put in place. That the local councils, instead of getting the local business rates, they get 50% currently. For any business rates arising around shale development, they'll get 100% of those, which again is a huge boon to the local communities. And then finally, on top of that, the industry itself has undertaken to make those contributions to ensure that the communities will get some benefit from this. And the whole idea behind this is to ensure that whilst the Exchequer gets the tax that the industry will pay, it's to ensure that the local communities get a share of that to reflect the fact that they have this going on in their community and that they benefit from it.
Is that enough for you, John Ashworth, in the studio?
Well, I think it's a reasonable suggestion that communities should get some of those benefits. But there's bigger questions here. I mean, John says that the regulatory regime is very strong. People don't believe that, and they think that the regulatory regime needs to be strengthened. People have got concerns about the type of chemicals that are used, about the methane gas, and also, you know, everyone knows or reads about, you know, these tremors that have been up in Blackpool when it had to be stopped. Are we going to have tremors in the East Midlands? You know, these are big questions.
Are we going to have tremors in the East Midlands, John?
The short answer to that is, as a consequence of fracking, the answer would be no, because the industry is putting in place safeguards and risk assessments to preclude that from happening. Let's also put into context...
But it has happened before, though, hasn't it?
There was the occasion in the file, which is well documented, but let's put that into some perspective. It's the equivalent, and Professor Richard Davis, in a report that he issued subsequent to this, referred to it as the equivalent of jumping off a step ladder. So we have to put some of this into some context. And if I look at, you know, particularly in the area you're looking at an industry there that historically has had, when I'm talking about coal mining, which it's an area that's very used to having these sorts of tremors on a regular basis.
So we just need to get used to it then. We've had coal mining here and we now could get fracking here, Jessica.
Well, I'm not quite sure that's the case. As I say, I think with this issue, what we need to be careful is not to sort of worry people and frighten them until we've got the facts. But that's why the industry, John and his business, and that's why elected representatives need to be very clear what the facts are. What if something's going to happen in the local area, make sure people are really well informed. I think the point about revenue, 100% of the revenue going back to the local community is really important, but it's not the most important thing. As I say, it's about information.
And Jessica, I would agree entirely with you. I think we as an industry have an obligation, and one of our undertakings under a charter that we've issued is about public engagement. It's about being transparent, and you talked about politicians. We too have to build the trust of the local communities in which we work, and that's absolutely essential really to get that social licence to operate here.
And John's saying that could happen in 2015. John Ashworth, are you for it or against it on what you're hearing here? Has that reassured you at all, or do you still need to know more?
Well, I think I need to know more, but I think, you know, we've got a problem about energy supply in this country. So gas is going to have to be part of that, but I also want to see more renewables. I personally think coal should be part of it, and I hope the government does step in and sorts out Thoresby in Edmonstone, doesn't let it go under. So I do think there is a role for gas, but a lot of people in my constituency, although probably not going to be affected by it directly, have raised with me concerns about the regulatory regime and whether this is environmentally safe.
Okay.
And those are the answers we need.
And so, John, in London, what do you think about the protests that we've seen here? Already some starting.
Well, first of all, everyone is entitled, to their opinions, and obviously if people object to something, they're entitled to protest, and we don't, I kind of support that in a sense. That's part of a democracy in which we live. The issue is often about trying to deal, and the word facts was used earlier on.
Okay.
And that's the key issue, is there's a lot of emotive language used here, but what we find when we engage with people and actually start talking about the facts, that people become more reassured that this can be done safely.
Well, we'll wait and see, John Playmars. Thank you very much indeed.